Hello everybody, so today in this video we're going to be talking about one of my absolute favorite ways to catch fish in the early summer. Even in the spring you can use this technique, but in the early and late summer this is easily one of my favorite ways to fish. The main areas that I like to fish these type of baits in this rig is in shallow water, mainly in shallow water. You can catch fish out in 10 to 20 foot of water. It's a very patient, very slow technique when you're fishing in deeper water. When you're up in shallows, you don't have to work it as slow. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But when you're out there in 10, 20 foot of water, it's a lot harder to fish. Now, if you're from the boat or from the bank, the best ways to fish this is around shallow cover. Trees, sparse grass, little pockets of grass everywhere. You can fish it around those. My favorite places to fish them are around trees that are leaning into the water. That's where I literally started fishing this rig, was around a tree that was growing on the bank, but it had grown to the point where it was leaning into the water, and probably a good quarter of the tree was in the water. And that's where I started fishing this rig. So the main things that you're going to need is obviously your rod, reel, and line. I suggest either 8 or 10 pound line. You can go with 12, but you're definitely not going to be throwing a bait caster with this stuff. This is going to be a spinning rod bait for sure. There's pretty much, it's almost a weightless bait, but it's not. It's a very light bait, and you're going to need a spinning rod for this. So if you have, your favorite spinning rod, my favorite two spinning rods. Now, the Code 13 or the white, Code White by 13 Fishing, I have yet to catch a fish on, but it is looking really, really good. I like it. It's looking pretty darn good as my new favorite finesse fishing rod. The Mike Iaconelli Never Give Up white spinning rod that I have also is a pretty good rod. And then my normal Shakespeare rod reel is a pretty darn good setup as well. Anything that's spinning rod can work with this, as long as it's a light. You can use bluegill crappie stuff for this. If you have an ultralight rod, and if you're fishing for smaller fish, that would be a ton of fun. I really don't fish with ultralights unless I'm going after some really small panfish, and even then, I'm still going with stuff I use for bass. Just downsizing the hooks and stuff like that. But, this here is a technique that I've caught a lot of fish on. I've caught 4-pounders on. I will try to, if I can remember, I'll make the thumbnail of this video a picture of about a 3.5 to 4 pound fish that I caught on one of the setups that I'm getting ready to show you here. So what this setup is called, I've called it this for ever since I started fishing it, and that is the Ultra Finesse Shaky Head. So what you need, instead of going with a 1/4 ounce shaky head or a 3/8 ounce shaky head, all you're going to need, hook-wise, is that. Now you can go a little bit bigger, you can go a little bit smaller if you're fishing super duper shallow water and there's bass up in there. Go with a smaller jig head. This one here I believe is a 1/32 or something like that. Honestly, I don't know the size of these jig heads because I just got a bunch of them given to me for free. Now unpainted, if I had a color of jig head that I would use, it would be white with red eyes. Other than that, unpainted jig heads are fine. That's what I'm using here. Just an unpainted jig head. Now, a lot of people would think, oh, that's way too small. What if you hook into a big bass? All you got to do is play it. If you can play that fish a little bit longer, if you can tire it out, you can catch big fish. Let's go back in time to where they used to use wood hooks, bone hooks. Those things weren't metal. Those things didn't last, very long. You hook up into a 5-pound fish back then, you'd have to play that fish for a while. It wasn't like you just set the hook and drop it on the bank. It wasn't that easy. You had to wait for that fish to tire out, and then you could lift it back up out of the water. So, you hook up into a big fish. I've hooked up into some big fish using this rig. Just play it. Loosen your drag. You want your drag to be pretty loose. You don't want it to be, when you hook up into a 1.5-pound fish, just to be screaming down through the lake. But you do want it to be a little bit lighter than you would when you're fishing a drop shot or something normal, like a normal shaky head or something like that. So basically all you're going to need is a tiny little jig head, such as this, and your favorite finesse worm. So my two favorite finesse worms are the 6-inch Doxer Company finesse worm. This one here is Black Magic with a white tail. You can get 7 of these in a pack for $4. Or the 4-inch Ultra Finesse worm. Now this is the bait that I started fishing this with, and I'll tell you a little bit of a story here in just a second. So the 4-inch Ultra Finesse worm, this is June Bug, and this one here is in chicken liver. June Bug right now is probably one of my favorite colors. I really like that color. It's a beautiful purple. I got green, blue, and purple flake in there, and it looks insanely cool. You can get a pack of 15 of these 4-inch Ultra Finesse worms for $4. Awesome deal, in my opinion. These are probably one of the smallest baits, one of the biggest fish that I've ever caught on a really small bait. I caught a 4.5 pounder on this setup that I'm getting ready to show you here. I think this was back in April. No, I want to say this was back in May, I think. We were fishing a smaller pond, and I caught about a 3.5 pound fish. You guys will see it on the thumbnail. I've also caught a couple bigger fish. I've even caught some bluegill doing this. I've actually caught a lot of bluegill doing this. This is one of those techniques that if you're, swimming, or not swimming, but if you're walking down the bank and you see like a bluegill bed, all you have to do is like break off part of the tail of the worm, like that little bit right there, thread it on that jig head, flip it out there, and you can catch a bluegill 100%. I've done it before. I used to do that a lot when I first started making the 4-inch Ultra Finesse worm. I'd see a bluegill on a bed, I'd break off the tail, flip it out there, catch a fish, put it right back together, and go catch a bass. It'd be pretty easy to do. So what the rig is, and I'll show it to you with both baits, the 6-inch and the 4-inch. So basically what you do is you take the head of your worm right here. This is the head of the bait. You take the hook, and if you look on the bait, there's a rounded head part right here. There's a flat, little squared off end here. There's a rounded head here. Take that hook, and you go right straight through the middle. You leave a tiny little bit still there. And what you do is you twist it around, and you push it right up on the bait keeper, right there. Then, basically what the bait's going to look like then is just that right there. That's what it's going to look like. Then you take and you bend that worm up. It's a little bit hard for me to do with the lighting. And then you make it to where that hook is pointed out there. Make sure that the head of the bait's still on that collar ring. And then you Texas rig it. Or if you're fishing around, open water, you don't have to do that. But in my areas, I usually just put that hook just a little bit under the skin of the bait. I think that it helps a little bit coming over brush and around grass. Now this is not a bait that you want to throw when there's like a ton of grass on the bottom of your lake. If you have rocks, a lot of small rocks, or if you have a lot of brush piles, in like in this type of a bait here, the main depth that I fish this bait is anything under 3 foot deep. If it's like 4 or 5 foot deep, I'll upgrade to maybe a 1/4 ounce shaky head or a 3/8 ounce shaky head and just go normal shaky head fishing with like the 6-inch worm right here, or maybe a slammer worm or something like that. But when I'm fishing this bait here, 3 to 2 feet of water, 1 foot, that's around the depth that I normally would fish this bait. Just because of how slow it sinks, it will take a little bit to sink in anything over 4 feet. But if you have the patience and if you have the time, if you think the fish will bite it, by all means, go right on ahead and fish it. I've done it. I've caught fish in around 10 to 11 foot of water with this rig. And it works. It does work. I've done it before. But that's all up to you, That right there is the perfect little setup. Awesome little bait right there. Now, a lot of people would think that this little bit right here, where the hook comes through, that's pretty much all the bite you're really getting. And it doesn't even look like there's really much of a bite, but I've caught 3.5 pounders on this and never had a problem. I'm sure I've missed fish. I think I've missed fish on anything. There's no, there's no bait that you're not going to miss fish on. You're not never going to miss a fish. That's just fishing. You're never going to hook and catch every single fish that bites. If you did, then it wouldn't be fishing, it'd be catching. And I like catching, but I'd rather fish more than just catch a bunch of fish, because that would get old after a while. I think, going out and having to trick those fish into thinking that this is a food, this is a bait that they can eat, and, you know, sustain themselves, and then tricking them into biting it, hooking them, and then being able to release them. I think that is a lot of fun. And that's something that I do, you know, whenever I catch a fish. You know, I think it's really cool that I was able to trick that fish into thinking that this piece of soft plastic is something they want to eat. And I think it's pretty cool. Next, we'll go ahead and talk about how to rig it on the 6-inch. So, if you guys look on this bait right here, there's right here is where it starts. There is a flat side right there. It's flat. The rest of it's rounded, but that there's flat. And it goes down to the tail. You want to make sure that that there is facing down when you put the hook into the bait. So you're basically going to do the exact same thing that you did with the other one. And if you look on this bait, there's a little bit of a ring right here, and then there's the end. Right in the middle is where you want to hook that bait. Right in the middle of that ring, or right in the middle between the ring and the end of the head, and then you push it right on up, just like so, and then you're going to go ahead and do the same thing like you normally would do. Lighting messed me up, sorry about that. You're going to do the exact same thing you did with the other bait, and that right there is how it's going to look. Now that there, the reasons why you fish this bait. I'll give you a few really quick reasons of why I fish this and how I fish this. So the reasons why I fish this is just for those more finicky fish, you know, that are traditionally seeing, you know, 1/4 ounce, 3/8 ounce, 1/2 ounce sinkers on these baits, and they're just plummeting down through the water and just hitting the bottom real hard and getting snapped and popped and everything else. When you're fishing this bait, you pretty much don't even move it most of the time, especially if you're fishing clear water. Usually when you're cast it out there and it's slowly falling, because this bait, when it's hooked, it basically just slow falls just like this. And if you have a bait, you know, like the 6-inch finesse worm here, it's got that bulb tail. That tail will kind of slowly move as it's falling, and that's a really cool technique there. Something else really quickly that you can do is a little finesse shake or a flick shake. You can hook it right in the middle, and you can use it as a flick shake as well. I've done that, and I've caught fish as well. But like I said, it's a very finesse bait when you're fishing clear water and it's going down through the water very slowly. The fish can see it from a longer ways. You know, if there's a fish, you know, if you got, you know, 2 to 3 foot clear water where you can see the bottom in 2 or 3 feet of water, and that fish is 4 or 5 foot away, all of a sudden they hear that little ripple on the water where that bait hits, and it's a very light bait, so you don't make a whole lot of a big splash when it hits the water. And as it's falling, they hear that splash, and they kind of come over to investigate, and all of a sudden they see this little thing swimming down through the water. It hits the bottom, and then you just very, like, I mean, I'm talking super duper slow move that bait, and them fish see that, and they think, hey, there's an easy meal. I can grab it and go and chase other minnows and stuff. So they go down there and they eat it. And I've even had situations where I was sitting there and I was fishing this bait, and I knew there was some grass on the bottom, but you could very easily tell the difference between just a little bit of grass and a bluegill or a bass bite. So when I was sitting there moving that bait very slowly, all of a sudden I just felt something machine gunning the tail of that bait. And I'm talking like it felt like somebody had a little miniature jackhammer down there on the end of my bait and was just tapping it really hard. And I was like, okay, that's got to be a bluegill. And then all of a sudden my rod tip just goes thunk and just started swimming off. And I'm thinking, well, that's a bass. So I set the hook and ended up catching about 1.5 pound, 2 pound fish. And what happened, or at least this is what my brain got to thinking about, and this is what I think happened. I think that this bass probably seen this bait, but the bluegill got to it first, and the bluegill was sitting there pecking at it, and that bass, being the territorial bass that it is, probably didn't like that bluegill was pecking on that bait. So that bass got mad and chased the bluegill off, came back and just swooped in and destroyed the worm. And I caught the bass. So that's what I'm guessing happened. I'm not no fishing expert by any means. Some people in the comment section say that I know everything. I don't claim to know everything. I just show you guys what I know, which, you know, not to toot my own horn, but I do know quite a bit. You know, it's a lot of useless information to some people, but in my eyes and in a lot of the people that watch my videos' eyes, it's pretty good information. And I thank you guys for watching this video. If you do have any luck doing this, or if you have done this yourself, let me know down in the comments. If you do this, I do suggest using a very light jig head and a very small worm. Just like I said, the 4-inch Ultra Finesse worm is 100% my favorite worm when I'm finesse fishing. Whether I'm drop shotting, doing the shaky head technique or whatever, I'm most of the time using that worm. But when I'm wanting a little bit bigger presentation, I'll go with the 6-inch. But the 4-inch is perfect size for this this way of rigging it. So, like I said, thank you guys for watching once again. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Share this video out to anyone who may be able to use these techniques this year. Great luck, or good luck to you all. I hope you have a great year of fishing. Hope you catch some giants, and hope my videos help you catch a giant. So thank you guys for watching once again. Bye.